Good afternoon and welcome to Football League World TV. This afternoon we've got a Charlton Athletic debate show for you. I'm your host Marcus Ali and I'm delighted to say that joining me is Addicts fan Ben Fleming. How are you doing today, Ben?
Very good, thank you. Cheers for having me on.
No problem at all. Delighted to have you on and get into this show. So much to talk about, as it always seems to be at the Valley. Before we get into today's show, I'm going to encourage you to please get involved in the comments section. Let us know your thoughts, opinions, any questions you want to throw at Ben or I. And also, please drop a like on the video. We really do appreciate all the support that we get. So to kick off today's show, we're going to start with the manager, Dean Holden. As you can see from the title of the video, Holden has made some promising sort of steps at the start of his managerial reign at the Valley. It's been just 7 league games so far, so quite a small sample size. 4 wins, 1 draw and 2 losses. Just wanted to get your initial thoughts to kick off the show, Ben. Have you seen any standout changes between Dean Holden and Ben Garner? And just what's the feeling after 7 league games at the helm?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one with Dean Holden. I think if you rewind the clock to when he was appointed, I think a lot of the reaction from the fan base was, one, probably, who is he? Because I think it's fair to say a lot of us didn't know who he was. He hasn't got a sort of great track or a sort of extensive track record as a number one. But I think a lot of it was, it doesn't really matter who's in charge because of everything that's going on behind the scenes. And I think both of those sort of led to a bit of apathy towards the appointment. But to be fair to him, I think he's proven almost everyone wrong. I think for me, even before you get on the pitch stuff, the way he conducts himself in interviews, the way he speaks, I think it's quite clear that he's a very straight talking man. Says it how he sees it, and I think for a Charlton fan base that has long been sort of struggling to know what people are thinking behind the scenes, it's good to have someone sort of fronting the club and being honest with decisions. I thought the way he handled the Macaulay Bond signing was fantastic. And on the pitch, I think it's been very positive. I think what I've liked is the clarity in how we play. I think so often with maybe Jackson and sometimes with Garner, you sort of knew how they wanted to play when it all came together, but so often it felt like the players were on the pitch and didn't really know what they were doing, how they were looking to progress the ball at the pitch. I think it's quite clear with the way he set them up that we're gonna play it long from goal kicks. We're not gonna faff around at the back. We're going to get it out to Raksaki and get it out to Blackett-Taylor and play fast and play attacking football. And the last game I was at was the Bolton game, and okay, we lost 2-1, but that was evident there. We're on the front foot, looking to be aggressive and play attacking football. And I think it's been a breath of fresh air, really, for me.
Yeah, it definitely does seem to have struck the right note with the fan base so far. And your point on the way that he's sort of spoken to the media and addressed certain issues, that's definitely an aspect of football management that's so important now in the social media age, and definitely seems to have aided Holden's initial or the start of that relationship with a fan base that was looking for someone to really hold on to in this period. So to stick with Holden for now, obviously the title of the video is "Can Dean Holden Succeed at Charlton Athletic?" To break that down a little bit more and interpret it in your own way, Ben, I just wanted to ask you first off, how would Dean Holden need to perform for it to represent success in the short term initially, of course, with his contract only being until the end of the season?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think. As I said, he knows he's only got a contract till the end of the season. So I guess for him, obviously there's going to be an element of long-term planning, but a lot of it has just got to be, let's just focus on next game. Let's try and get as many points between now and the end of the season. I think, touch wood, we should be safe of any sort of relegation threat. I think it's probably very unlikely unless we go on a remarkable run that we're going to trouble the promotion places either. So, there in essence is not a lot to play for, most likely for him. So I think success for him will be, just building on this positive start, keeping the positive feel around the club. And we saw with Jackson when he came in. Obviously there was a lot of contention around his sacking, but he came in and had this fantastic start. And I remember that game. I think it was against It might have been against Plymouth around Christmas when the whole Valley was sold out and we had that fantastic win, and he went on this great run, and then it all sort of petered off towards the end of the season, and obviously he was sacked over the summer. So I think for Holden, if he wants to, and he sounds like he wants to be at the club long term, and obviously we can't really complain with what he's done so far. I think the task for him is going to be making sure that these levels of performances sustain themselves, and that hopefully by the end of the season, the club have no choice to give him a new contract and he can start, planning long term. But I think, just making sure the performance levels stay, as close to where they are right now, is probably going to be his task from now until the end of the season.
Okay, so maintaining those levels of positivity that we've seen in the initial 7 league games. Not looking at a distant playoff push at all. I think the gap's around double figures points with one game played more than 6th place Barnsley at the moment. Is that something that you'd want to sort of keep in the background for now, at least?
I mean, I think obviously that's going to be something he's going to be aiming for. You'd be silly not to, if you were the manager, trying to motivate the players, you've got to keep that open as long as you can. But you look at how we got on against Bolton, and they are a team right up in there, in the thick of the playoffs, and I think they'll come to make the playoffs. And they, really, I think 2-1 probably flatters us a bit. Okay, we put in a good performance against Barnsley, and you never want to say never to anything. I would love us to go on a charge in the second half of the season and get up and around those top 6. But I think given the lead, given the gap that we have to cover, and maybe as we'll get on, maybe sort of some concerns over squad depth, I think it would be an almighty task to ask him to get there. But who knows? Anything's possible.
And of course, this may depend on what goes on off the pitch. But if Dean Holden was to earn a new contract heading into next season, what would success look like in the medium to long term for him approaching a new contract?
Yeah, I think obviously the medium term aim is got to be, can we get back in the playoffs? Can we get ourselves up to the Championship? I think, as you mentioned with the ownership talk, it's tricky to know what kind of backing he will get if he was there in the summer. It obviously depends on who's in charge, what their level of commitment to the club is, what their level of ambition is. But I think for him, obviously, he's going to be targeting those playoffs if he's there next year. But I think, without some continued investment, that's going to be a tricky task with this squad, because as we've seen, there's only 3 teams that can go up, and there's going to be an awful lot of quality that's left behind, regardless of who goes up.
Next up, we're going to be touching on that off-pitch situation in SE7. So as it stands, the latest with takeover talk at Charlton seems to be that the group led by Charlie Methven are leading the race to acquire the club from Thomas Sandgaard. Having said that, there were reports yesterday that there are at least 2 other parties interested in purchasing the club. That's from media coverage from The Athletic and then Football Insider publishing that article saying that there are other interested parties yesterday. What are your initial thoughts on it, Ben? Obviously, seems like a lot of noise in the background. There was some just before the turn of the year, but seems to be speeding up a little bit now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite clear that Sandgaard wants to sell. I think that's the obvious thing. I mean, it was sort of known, but obviously he hasn't addressed it. But I think it's quite clear now with this news breaking that he is clearly looking to sell. I think the Charlie Methven consortium or group, whatever name you want to label it as, is concerning. I think 10 million. I can't quite remember the fee that Sandgaard bought the club from De Châtelet, but I have a feeling it was a hell of a lot more than that. And if you read a lot of the stuff that Sunderland fans have to say about Methven, the way he ran the club, the way that he sold young players, the way that he leveraged the sale against various assets, it doesn't particularly make for encouraging reading. So I think that consortium and if that group was to come in charge, obviously you've got to see what they do initially. But I think all Charlton fans, regardless of who's brought in, are going to have a sort of initial caution given, who we've had previously and what has transpired. But I think there would be increased scrutiny and doubt over whether this consortium has any real desire to run the club long term, and whether it's going to be something that they're going to try and flip, which I think has been said in various reports that you mentioned.
So the mood of the fan base at this point would seem to be that they'll be more encouraged by the two unknown parties at the moment in talks with the club, rather than that Charlie Methven-led group. Moving on to Thomas Sandgaard, of course, still the current owner of the football club, with just over 2.5 seasons into his ownership of Charlton, all of which have been spent in League One. A playoff finish hasn't been delivered in that time, and investment in the transfer market has gradually diminished over that time. Do you think it's definitely time for him to move on and look to change hands of the club?
I think so. I mean, if we were going off his original timetable, I think we'd be Champions League football in about 1.5 years. I think he said Champions League football in 4 years, something like that. No, I think it's a classic case of over-promising and under-delivering. I think you can come in, especially when he did, in the circumstances that he did, and say all the right things and get the fan base on side and play a guitar and appear in a pub and all those types of things. But I think it's been quite clear, as you mentioned, the lack of investment, the cutback to the Sparrows Lane, which I think has been mentioned with the youth team. I think it's quite clear that his sort of short-term desire to spend money isn't there. So I think, for all parties involved, it's best if he moves on. But obviously, we've got to make sure that the right owners and the right backers come in that aren't just going to try and do the same thing.
Yeah, so a long way still to go with Charlton's off the pitch journey, considering that it would seem that Thomas Sandgaard is looking to sell the club at the moment. But we'll be touching back on pitch matters in the next section. So it was quite a busy January transfer window for Charlton Athletic. No major incomings, in the sense that all players brought in are on deals expiring at the end of the season, but quite a lot of outgoing business as well. Just to run through them all quickly for you, the incomings are Todd Kane, Matt Penny and Gavin Kilkenny on loan, while Michael Hector and Macaulay Bonne joined on 6-month contracts. The outgoings are Craig McGillivray, Jake Forsakaski, Jaden Stockley and Owen OConnell, with Charlie Kirk, Sam Lavelle, Conor McGrandles and Dialang Jayasimi leaving the club on loan, those last 4 players that I just listed. Obviously, it was a busy one, a lot to take in, Ben. Just to start with the incoming players, obviously 3 loanees and 2 players, Hector and Bonne, who were without a club when they joined the club. Anyone in particular that you're excited about, or kind of just plugging the gaps that were left behind?
I do think that there can be some cause for sort of optimism with these signings. I think that Todd Kane probably does a job at right back. Obviously got injured on his debut, and I think Sean Clare has always sort of flattered to deceive playing at right back. I do think when he's fit, Mandela Egbo is going to be the first choice, and I think we saw in the few games he's played for us so far that he is a really exciting option. Matt Penny on the left didn't have a great game when I watched him against Bolton, but he is left-footed and he's naturally going to play on that side and does look to get forward. So I think in that sense, if he can settle into that role, I think it could be a useful signing. Macaulay Bonne offers us something different. I know he's got a perhaps slightly tainted relationship with some Charlton fans, but he offers us a hugely different profile to obviously Stockley that left and Leeburn, who's sort of come from nowhere this year, and I think certainly his pace and his willingness to get about is useful, whether he possesses a sort of real finishing ability that is at the top of this division, I'm not entirely sure. But given there was no desire from Sandgaard to spend, I think bringing him in, bringing the others I mentioned in are good. And then Gavin Kilkenny, good debut against extra at the weekend. Seems like he could offer a good passing option. And then Michael Hector, difficult to really know where he's at. I think he last played a game in May of 2022. So in theory, a good signing given the level he's played at, but difficult to know the timeline of when he'll be back and what level he will reach. But I think it's probably about as good as you could have expected the window to be in terms of incomings, based on the fact that, Sangal clearly had no desire to spend any money. And as you say, we have plugged gaps in the squad. We've got a better passer in midfield. We've got a naturally left-footed left back. We've got a pacier striker. So nothing hugely exciting, but perhaps something that's done the job and probably they've worked all right in a window where they probably had no funds to work with.
Yeah, definitely. Outgoing business, really the sort of headline dealings at Charlton. Let's start with Jayden Stockley. Entered the season as club captain under Ben Garner and ends up departing for Fleetwood Town at the back end of the January transfer window. What do you make of that one and sort of the way it turned out in the last few months?
Yeah, it's quite an impressive fall from grace when you put it like that. Club captain at the start of the season, out of the lineup, sort of towards the end of Ben Garner, and obviously since Dean Holden's come in and now sold in January. I think it makes sense for all parties, really. He was a good striker for us, and he was good at the level, sort of in large parts of Jackson's sort of reign. But I think when you put him up front on his own and you're trying to play a quick, direct, fast style of football, he's not the person to do that. And I think we saw that obviously he's quite limited with his sort of technical ability on the ground. And I think to get a substantial fee for him, or a substantial fee in inverted commas for him, is probably good business. And he scored at the weekend. He'll probably score this weekend against us. But I think it probably makes sense to get rid of him and bring in Macaulay, who, as I said, is a slightly different profile and probably more suited to how Dean Holden wants to set his side up.
Absolutely, yeah. Certainly going to be interesting to see how Stockley gets on at the Valley with Fleetwood Town at the weekend. Carrying on with players that were in leadership roles at the start of the season, Owen OConnell, the club's vice captain, ends up moving to Wrexham, sort of a surprise late window move. But when you consider the finances at their disposal, it can't have been too much of a surprise to lose him. But as potentially a key defender coming back from injury, were you disappointed to see OConnell leave?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. The finances involved, which feels crazy to say, given they're obviously two divisions below us, but it's probably quite clear that he's been offered a lot of money and something that we can't match. But yeah, I think Dean Holden said when he left that he didn't see him having a place in his starting 11. I don't know whether that's just what he said or what he honestly believes, because I'd far prefer him in my 11 over Ryan Innes. So yeah, I do think it's a big loss. I think at times he was caught out for a sort of lack of pace, and could be got at a bit, and maybe that's something that Dean Holden saw and was a bit concerned about, given his want to get the fullbacks a bit further forward and be a bit more proactive and attacking. But I think he was a really good defender for the level, probably our best centre back prior to the January window, and yeah, obviously he was out injured and he's gone, but such is life. And as you say, I think the financial package is probably what sort of meant that we didn't really have much choice. So a disappointing loss, but I'm hopeful that he won't be that it won't make too much of an impact with who we've brought in and the sort of the rise of Luca Ness, which has really helped to provide some quality at the back.
And another late window mover was Charlie Kirk to Burton Albion on loan, closely followed by Sam Lavelle, of course. Kirk will come back to the Valley with 2 years left on his contract in the summer. What do you make of this move? Was an important player at the start of the season, but again, it tends to have fizzled out in a sort of disappointing fashion for Kirk at Charlton.
Yeah, I really don't know what to make of Charlie Kirk. I think, obviously when he came in, he didn't have the best of starts under Nigel Adkins, and that there was a lot of personal stuff he was dealing with, moving away from Crewe. I think he had a close family bereavement as well, which certainly doesn't make a move like that easy to take. But I think obviously when Jackson came in, he was slightly hampered by the fact that Jackson wasn't playing wingers, and that certainly affected him. But if you look at all the managers that we've had, the four, Adkins, Jackson, Garner, and now Holden, all four of them have started with Charlie Kirk in their lineups when they first come in. And I think on paper you can see why, because he's got a very impressive track record at Crewe. He's obviously highly rated. He went to Blackpool, but with each of those four managers, he's then fallen out of the side and ended up either on the bench or not even in the squad. And I do wonder whether at some point that is a reflection of the player rather than a reflection on the manager or any system. And obviously, we're not privy to what goes on at training or anything that goes on behind the scenes, but I have to believe that maybe it's something that's going on behind the scenes or a problem with him, because if we've had four different managers and he keeps falling out of favour with each manager, at what point is it the manager's problem or the manager's decision not to pick him? And at what point is it sort of him making himself unavailable due to various issues, whatever that may be? So it's a shame to lose him. I think he's a really good player on his day. As you mentioned, he had a really good start to the season, but I don't know, something clearly isn't clicking under all the managers, and hopefully that can change, because I do think he's an exciting player.
So having touched on a handful of individuals there was no money spent by Charlton in the transfer window. And it did seem like there was an incentive to trim the wage bill. But irrespective of that, really, would you say that the Addicts are in a better or worse position heading out of the January transfer window compared to how they entered it?
It's tricky. I think on paper we have moved out some players who clearly weren't playing well or weren't playing. Kirk, Jaisimi, Lavelle, Stockley, and I think that's probably a good move because they weren't playing. And whether that was that or whether it was a case of wanting to trim the wage bill, who knows? I think, as I said, some of the players we brought in have plugged gaps. I don't think any of them are going to set the world alight. I hope I'm proven wrong, but I think it's a fairly standard window. I don't think we've particularly gone up. I don't think the quality in the squad has particularly gone down. The only concern, and hopefully it doesn't manifest itself, is that depth. I think we've seen injury problems with Terrell Thomas, with Ryan Innes. If either of them get injured and Michael Hector's struggling to hit match fitness, and that's a real concern. I think another real area of concern is out wide. I mentioned how key that Jason Raksaki and Corey Blackett-Taylor are to the way Holden plays. Now, if one of them gets injured, as far as I'm aware, the only out-and-out winger we have is Tyrese Campbell, who's played 2-3 starts maybe for the club. I know Jack Payne can play out there, but that's a real area of concern for me. I think if we lose either Blackett-Taylor or Raksaki, then we're really in trouble. I know there was a late move for a Wigan player, I think it was Edwards, that didn't go through. But I think I'm concerned about some areas of squad depth, but in terms of who is actually left on paper, I think they will make sense.
So as we come towards the end of today's debate show, I just wanted to ask you one final question, Ben. Obviously, it's a very difficult question to answer, and with so much going on off the pitch at the moment, there are so many variables to consider. But right now, as we sit here on the 8th of February, in the sort of approaching the business end of the 2022-23 season, can you see Dean Holden being a success at Charlton Athletic? I think we've defined that as to produce a playoff push or promotion push next season, should he be given a new contract. Can you see that happening?
Seen so far point to that potentially being the case. I think he's made a really good start. I think the style of football's been good. I think the way he's presented himself has been really good. I think, as you say, approaching the business end of the season, we're going to find out more about him and his ability to, can he hit those levels consistently when teams perhaps figure out how we want to play? Can he find ways around that? So I think there's going to be more questions to come in the sort of coming games and weeks and months, and if he can answer that, and if he can continue to get us up the table and can continue playing good football, I see no reason why he can't succeed on the pitch. I think, as we've mentioned, and is always the case seemingly with Charlton, matters off the pitch may take that out of his hand, and there's no guarantees he even gets offered a new contract. There's no guarantees that he gets given any money in the summer. There's no guarantees we don't sell half of our squad in a way to break even. So I think on the pitch, from what I've seen so far, there's no reason why he can't succeed. It's just whether sort of the disharmony and the confusion and the lack of direction off the pitch is gonna hamper him too much. So yeah, that's sort of where I net out.
So there we have it. Dean Holden is in a good position and has shown a lot of promise so far to suggest that he can achieve success at Charlton Athletic in the future. Of course, dependent on the support that he gets from the board and the hierarchy at the club, which could be set to change by the time his contract even comes to expiration in the summer. So a long way to go. Plenty of fun still to be had on the pitch and monitoring the Addicts, but our conclusion is that it remains sort of based on off-pitch decisions as to how well Dean Holden will perform in the dugout. All that's left for me to say is thank you very much for joining me, Ben. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.